So normally, thank you to all of you for coming, and again for having. Bill, thank you again on Friday this time for the research seminar. So I've sent the PowerPoint to you because it's not working here and it's not working online anymore. So if we wait a bit longer, it's never going to work. So it's better for you to have it. You can use it. Look at the PowerPoint on your telephones if you got it. I sent it on your. I sent it by mail a minute ago. Normally. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So normally, so the point of today is to carry on with, with one of the subjects which was touched upon on Tuesday, and this time with a new subject on which Bill has been working or is working. He's going to tell us. And I'm glad that you came. It's just fun. And so, without further ado, Bill, please carry on.
Can I see the PowerPoint?
Yes, you can see the you can see the PowerPoint. Hang on, yeah, and okay. You can actually move it like that. Awesome. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello again. It's good to see you again. So, in the last session, the idea of AI in sort of life or death situations already came up, and also in the context of the military, the police. Yeah, so what I'm going to be doing is trying to, so I have a paper that's just coming out in the next month or so called Will Algorithms Win Medals of Honor, about the transformation of military security and defense through artificial intelligence and some of the ethical risks that this raises. But I wanted to start just for fun, since I know you guys have studied Alexis de Tocqueville, right? Volume 2 of Democracy in America. The concept of soft despotism. If you remember the second to last chapter in Democracy in America, Tocqueville has this kind of prescient warning of a future form of democratic despotism. It sometimes calls it administrative despotism, soft despotism. Does anybody remember what this was characterized by? What was soft despotism?
If I remember correctly, so I cannot claim to be talking, but it's the lack of the population's recognition of actually a population's lack of awareness of its lack of freedom or lack of need of freedom, as opposed to population that is aware of the need for freedom for its political conditions in the moment.
That's part of it, yeah.
Soft despotism is a new kind of tyranny, but not like traditional tyranny with a harsh despot, but because of expansion of power of the state and the controlling individuals.
Yes, so it's the idea of a centralized state apparatus, kind of system of top-down social control that aims to promote the citizens' well-being, comfort, safety, convenience, but at the same time weakens the citizens' virtue, capacity to live free lives, sort of autonomy, the citizens' love of liberty, and even ultimately community, organic community, independent of the state, leaving people atomized, isolated, lonely, and dependent on this, as he calls it, immense tutelary power that's just administering to their pleasures, right? So I want to ask, is there a sense in which Tocqueville's warnings about soft despotism, is there a sense in which those warnings could be relevant to our questions about a future social order guided by artificial intelligence? Now, I'm going to be talking about a very specific area, which has to do with defense and the military, but that's because of the paper that I had written. What I'm hoping to do in the future is expand this kind of critique out beyond just issues of the military to social control generally. Right. Okay. So let me say a few things about how AI and robotics are transforming policing, security, and defense. So the most well-known feature of this is mass biometric surveillance systems, right? Facial recognition systems, predictive policing technologies, and then also what are called laws or lethal autonomous weapons systems. So if you look on the third or fourth page of the PowerPoint, there are 3 pictures of lethal autonomous weapon systems. One is American, one is Russian, one is Chinese. So laws are essentially drones, either in the air, on the ground, or in water, that use artificial intelligence algorithms to move, to go to particular areas, to track targets, to rank targets, decide which ones are the most important, and then to fire and destroy targets, including obviously human beings, without the need for any human controller at all. Right? All you have, the human controller can launch the autonomous weapon, put it in autonomous mode, and then just leave it. And sometimes they're called loitering munitions, which means that they can just fly around and fly around and fly around until they spot the target. And then the AI system decides by itself whether to shoot her or not. So laws are being developed by all the major military powers in the world. Even in Europe, right? Europe says like, oh, European Union is quite concerned in the AI Act about lethal autonomous weapons. But of course, autonomy with AI is a kind of vague concept, right? It's a function both of the degree of independence from a human controller and the complexity of the task, right? So it's hard to define exactly when a weapon system is autonomous or not. So there are, and it's easy to take an existing weapon system that, for instance, the French military might have and switch on an autonomous mode. It's essentially a software update to advanced drones, right? The technology exists, so it's being developed by, excuse me, by all major military powers. But I don't just want to talk about, so the laws, these lethal autonomous weapons, they've got a lot of attention in the press, right? There are movements to try to ban them globally. Campaign to Stop Killer Robots is a famous one that's gotten a lot of signatures. Academics, public policy, think tanks, civil society, there's a lot of pressure to critique this, to analyze it, to try and ban it. It's not had much fruit yet. It's not had very much efficacy. There's strong sort of military logics that are driving this, right? And mainly the concern that if one power were to unilaterally stop development of that technology, that would put them at a strategic disadvantage to their competitors, right? Because one of these technologies, one of these weapon systems, they can function much faster than a human being. You can imagine a swarm of 30, lethal autonomous weapons. No person could control that, right? It's too complex for us. And if one power were to say, okay, we're not going to do this, and other competitors were to advance their technology, that would put the ethical power at a strategic disadvantage. That's one of the arguments that's used on behalf of these technologies. But anyway, my point, what I'd like to focus on is more than just lethal autonomous weapons. So AI is being used to replace human decision-making in the military, but also in the police and in the government, in a wide range of areas, besides just like whether to shoot or not, right? That's just one narrow question. There's AI used for intelligence analysis, weighing the potential civilian casualties and damage of strikes. This is called collateral damage algorithms, right? So in the past, a human being would have to think, okay, do we, do this particular military strike or not? It's in a civilian area, so it may have these casualties, and there has to be a kind of ethical assessment, both a military assessment, but in the laws of war, there should be an ethical assessment too of the risks to other human beings that may not be combatants, right? Civilians. Well, that's being automated by AI. So instead of a human being making that decision, there's AI systems making these collateral damage assessments, right? And then also wargaming and strategic decision-making, which is the most, the highest level kind of military analysis, right? Nuclear weapons, the sort of highest level stuff about the balance of power between states. So AI is being integrated into all of those activities, not just in the decision to shoot or not. It's being integrated into the augmented reality headsets of sort of next generation soldiers, so that they have kind of suggestions, or what's really more like orders from AI, focus on this, there's the thing, look over there, right? So really becoming strongly integrated into the way that the military is going to operate. The hope is what's called a centaur teaming between humans and machines. So if you remember your Greek myths, the centaur is the figure of the human head, the human upper body, and the lower body of the horse. So the idea here is that the human being, the human brain, will still be in control, but the AIs will be the beast right below that is under our control. Now, there's one way to see the topic of my talk is to ask, as another scholar has put it, whether we'll really have centaur militaries in the future or minotaur militaries. Minotaur is the other way around, right? The body is the man, the head is the beast. So whether it will be the AI that is calling all the shots and the human beings doing the small tasks that AI can't do, like maybe loading weapons or following orders from the AI. So, as we know, a polity, going back to Plato, no polity will be stable if it can't preserve itself, right? If it can't defend and preserve itself. But what happens when the guardian class, so to speak, if you think back to the Republic, what happens when the guardian class is no longer a human class, a class of human beings, but rather intelligent machines? So there's basically two key ideas that I'm starting from in this talk. One is the concept of virtue or martial virtue. So if you think about the ideal of a soldier in a republic or a democracy, the military is a peculiar institution in a democracy, right? Because it's not exactly, you know, it's a hierarchical institution. Its mission is an uncomfortable one because it involves violence and protection of the polity. But on the other hand, it's absolutely essential to the preservation of the polity. Right? You can't have a functioning polity without some means of defense. So one way that, you know, Democratic or Republican thought has tried to include the concept of the military is the idea of the citizen soldier. So it's that the soldier is not just supposed to be a mercenary, not just supposed to be a mafioso, it's supposed to be a patriot, yeah, civic-minded, you know, defending your fellow citizens, not trying to like take over, you know, not an autocrat, you know, immediately going to take over the minute they get a chance. I mean, the famous examples here of the, you know, military leaders who then stepped down after the end of the war. They didn't try to become kings, right? They were just trying to defend the people. And right? So on this view, you know, the ideal of a good soldier in a democratic republic is a soldier that has certain virtues, right? Courage, discipline, prudence, loyalty, and something like public spirit, the willing to sacrifice yourself for your fellow citizens. And most of us probably are not like that, right? I mean, how many of us are really willing to sacrifice our lives for the other people around us? Some of us maybe, but we need some people like that, right? It's even if it's uncomfortable and we don't like to think about it, we depend on other people who are willing to do that, right? So that's one. So key idea one, in a democracy, we want our soldiers to have a certain kind of moral character, right? They're not just effective tools of violence. They're supposed to, you know, be disciplined. They're supposed to be public spirited. They're supposed to be fellow citizens, right? Fighting on behalf of us, not on behalf of a dictator or something else. All right, second key idea, human technology relationships, right? The relation between human beings and technology can reshape our skills and reshape our patterns of attention, our thought, our feeling, our actions. So when tasks are highly automated, the human practitioner will shift from being an agent who does the task to being something like an overseer. So if you think about a pilot 50 years ago, really had to fly an airplane all the way, right? A pilot nowadays mostly only has to fly the airplane for a few minutes per flight in the takeoff and the landing. And that's really only because they're mandated to do so by the state. They could just not do anything and the autopilot do everything, right? What happens there is that this affects the skills, the habits, the attention, the character of the pilot. I mean, there's an open question whether pilots really fly airplanes anymore, whether some of them even know how to fly an airplane. Right? It's a little scary, but it's, you know, this comes up sometimes when the computer systems fail, right? So, but anyway, the point is automation brings a lot of benefits, but it also changes the role of the human practitioner, and it can bring risks as well. Okay, so what's behind the drive for lethal autonomous weapons and AI decision-making in the military? I think there's two things, related things. One is the thing I mentioned before, this sort of felt pressure to need to compete, right? It's a kind of arms race situation where each power feels like if they don't develop this technology, they're going to be put at a massive disadvantage to other powers. The balance of power will be destabilized, and you know, who knows what would happen then, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think, a wider kind of more philosophical idea, which I'll call the ideal of algorithmic intelligence. So this is the idea, came up in the last talk and probably in some of your other readings. This is the idea that human beings are sloppy, slow, biased, emotional. We're not good decision makers, especially if we haven't had a good lunch that day, or if we hadn't have a good rest. We're not dependable. We're not consistent, right? I mean, there's these studies of human judges in the legal system where they're given the same case in described just slightly differently, or if they've had breakfast or not, or whatever, and they give different decisions, right? So there's this vision of human beings as cognitively weak, and then this vision of AI as superior to us, as more precise, more rapid, more efficient, more consistent. So I think this ideal, right, we find it in the use of AI in business, in all sorts of areas, but it also is playing its role here in discussions about the military. It will do better than us. You know, general AI will be a much better general than, you know, Ulysses S. Grant or Napoleon or something. So, okay, so let me take a step back just for a second, get a little philosophical. What is it? I've been talking about virtues, military virtues. We need courage, integrity, right? Discipline, that sort of stuff. What is a virtue? That's a big philosophical question, kind of thing I love to talk about. I don't know, what would you guys say? Yeah.
From reading virtue ethicists and listing their virtues, I would say this is something that, according to the philosopher, humans need to be reminded of. But not necessarily doesn't necessarily apply to a machine, but say a human needs to be reminded to be courageous in a certain situation or humble in another situation. That doesn't not necessarily apply to machines.
Yeah, so it's something that humans need to be reminded of. They're things we need to aspire to be, right? It's not like just totally natural that I mean, you just look at little kids in the playground to see it doesn't come super naturally to like share, to be generous, or to be honest, or to be, you know, there are things that we sort of have to work at, especially when it's challenging to do so. The root of this concept in ancient philosophy, in ancient Greek philosophy, but also I think to some extent in Confucian and Buddhist traditions, the idea of a virtue is a kind of skill that enables you to do some activity in an excellent way. I know the Greek tradition the best, and here it's very pronounced, right? When Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, they talk about virtues, they're always using these examples like musicians. The virtue of a guitarist is their ability to play its chords, to be on time, to express emotions and how they're playing. The virtue of a teacher is the ability to communicate ideas in a clear fashion, of a mother to care for their child with warmth and patience, right? So there's skills that enable human beings to perform their activities well. On the classical tradition, virtues can't be reduced to following an abstract rule. Plato has this great example of, he asked whether courage could just be following the rule to always stand firm, right? And what do you think? You just had this rule, always stand firm. Would that make you courageous? Mm-hmm. Stupid, right? In certain circumstances, it would be really foolish, right? Yeah, like if it's, you know, you have to know when, I mean, there's a difference between being courageous and just being a fool, being an idiot, right? So in Aristotle's typology, which is the one I tend to favor, virtue tends to be a balance between opposing errors, right? So if you're courageous, you're not so fearful that you don't stand up when you should, but you're not so reckless that you just run to, you know, try and stop the marauding army by yourself or something, right? It would just be foolish. And actually the more courageous thing would be to wait, to gather, you know, an underground resistance or something like that, right? So key idea here is that you can't learn a virtue just by learning some rule, just by some set of instructions. Like there's no computer manual for being a virtuous human being that you just memorize it and then boom, you're ready to go. Instead, it takes habitual action, practice in life. And actually, you know, we know this, I know this, those of you who have kids will know this, but you'll see this, right? How you teach kids to be, you know, kind or generous. You don't just give them some like if-then instruction. You slowly habituate them to doing these things. You make it a habit. And then when it becomes a habit, they sort of get a feel for it. It's like learning to ride a bicycle, right? You can't really give someone, you know, the physics of balancing on a bicycle, and then they know how to balance on a bicycle. No, they gotta ride it. They gotta sort of fall down a few times, get a feel for it, and then they got it, right? They know it from the inside. On the classical tradition, the same thing is true of virtue. So virtues like courage, honesty, discipline, integrity, justice, kindness, generosity, blah, blah, blah. All those things, you have to learn it on the inside through practice, through experience. I mean, hopefully you have some good examples around you in your social world, whether your friends or your family or your parents, you know, or other people, but you emulate them and then you get the feel for it, like you learn other skills. Okay. So what happens when we automate a task? So when, you know, when we start to automate tasks in a substantial way, like in the case of aviation I gave you, you can start to get what are called human factors problems. So you get issues like de-skilling, the term in the literature is called de-skilling. That's where you have someone who was really good at something, but then by becoming reliant on the AI, they stop practicing their skill and they just sort of, when you don't practice a skill, you tend to lose it. You lose the skill, you don't know how to do it anymore. You can lose attention. That is, you are so sure that the AI or the automation is functioning properly that you start just watching videos on TikTok, right? You're not paying attention anymore. There are these examples of accidents with Tesla cars where people were found, you know, the Tesla car drives into a fire truck or whatever. You're supposed to, you sign some waiver that says like you will always, whenever you engage the autopilot system, you're always paying attention and always ready to intervene. Yeah, right. Like that's the whole point of engaging the system, is that people then want to check out, right? Start getting on the Instagram and doing, you know, sending messages or whatever. So people lose attention of their surroundings. And then also relatedly, people start to over-trust in the computer. They start to assume that what the computer is telling them must be right. So a great example, if you Google, don't do it right now because you get distracted, but after the class, Google Japanese tourists in Australia drive into the ocean. Okay, so people following GPS. I'm sure they're smart people. I mean, we laugh, but we ourselves are capable of this kind of thing too, right? They're following GPS instructions. They assume that it must be true. They drive into the ocean. They're going to an island. They don't realize whatever, the GPS, blah, 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 they drive into the ocean. Less dramatic examples we do all the time, right? I mean, I won't go into details, but similar things, not quite so bad, but you know, going to the Estoril Palace Hotel and ending up in like a scrapyard parking lot. That was like, obviously this is not the Palace Hotel, it's a junkyard. But you know, anyway, I didn't think that the system could be wrong. Okay. So here's a thought experiment of a future military going off of the current trends. Okay. So we imagine a military maybe 20 years from now. This military is composed of two factors, what I'll call robots and Zuckerbergs. Okay. Factor one, robots. That's just an umbrella term for drones, lethal autonomous weapons, cyber weapons, AI decision systems, right? All the technical stuff. Element number two, Zuckerbergs. That's an umbrella term for a small group of human managers, monitors, programmers, technicians. Okay. So what we don't have in this military is anything like a traditional soldier. There's no soldiers. There's drones, cyber weapons, AI, and then there's Zuckerbergs. What might be lost in... I'm going to talk about 3 virtues that I think will be lost in that circumstance, and then 3 vices that would be gained. Okay. 3 virtues that would be lost. 1, courage. You don't, I'll read a description because this stuff is so distant from most of us. It's sometimes, and for myself too, sometimes it's helpful to like read a description of what some of this stuff is actually like. So I'll read a description of a battlefield medic. Okay, so this is from the frontline journalist, Sebastian Junger. It says, the combat medic's first job is to get to the wounded as fast as possible, which often means running through gunfire while everyone else is taking cover. Medics are renowned for their bravery, but the ones I knew described it more as a terror of failing to save the lives of their friends. The only thing they're thinking about when they run forward to treat a casualty is getting there before the man bleeds out or suffocates. Incoming bullets barely register. Okay, that's pretty impressive stuff, right? I mean, I know I couldn't do that. It's amazing that there are people that can do that, right? But, and that would take a kind of, I mean, if you adopt the virtue ethical line, that would take an immense kind of practice and discipline and training to get to the point where you could actually do that. If everyone else is ducking down, the bullets are coming at you, you get up and go forward to go get the guy. I mean, that's crazy, right? You have to go against all your instincts, all your human instincts you'd have to overcome them to be able to do that. Now, if you're just turning on the AI powered weapons and sending them off to some distant place and monitoring them on the computer screen, you're not at any risk of anything, right? You don't need any kind of courage, much less courage at that level, right? You're just sort of detached and distant and just, you know, another scholar named Robert Sparrow calls this kind of military professional a desk jockey warrior, right? So he's not really a soldier in the traditional sense. They run no risk to themselves. So that's one virtue that seems like there's no context in which to form it or to use it. So it would just disappear. The second, loyalty. So it's common in descriptions of soldiers in variety. I mean, going back to the Iliad, right? This is not, these things are not new, really, right? The Iliad, the Civil War, American Civil War, I've looked at it, some letters from some, this is very common. They describe their relationship to their fellows in terms of love. They're willing to, it's almost like a kind of, almost at the level of a kind of romance in the sense that they're willing to die for this other person, right? Which is, again, it's pretty rare in like everyday life when we're just going to Starbucks and doing our thing and shopping and whatever. We don't have this like, I'm willing to die for this person, right? I mean, it's very intense. But Zuckerbergs in the future military, do they have the need for that kind of level of deep life loyalty? I don't see why, right? There's no need for it. And then lastly, wisdom. So I'll read another passage. This is from a scholar of military AI who happened to be a soldier himself, named Paul Charret. He writes, making life or death decisions on the battlefield is the essence of the military profession. Autonomous weapons don't just raise ethical challenges in the abstract, they are a direct assault on the heart of the military profession. What does it mean for the military professional if decisions about the use of force are programmed ahead of time by engineers and lawyers? Making judgment calls in the midst of uncertainty, ambiguous information, and conflicting values is what military professionals do. Autonomous weapons could change that. Okay, so again, if you're working from essentially a set of algorithms pre-programmed by engineers, there's no need for that kind of situational judgment. In the paper, I describe an example from Michael Walzer, a famous book that he wrote called Just and Unjust Wars, which actually talks about soldiers in World War II France and how they had to make decisions when they came across bunkers, whether they would shout down to the bunker to see if there was anyone hiding in there, or whether they would just throw a grenade in the bunker to be safe, right? And it was a really difficult thing because if you shout down, you might save civilians' lives. But if you do that, you might risk the lives of your men because then you're exposing yourself. Right, so you have to make a kind of judgment call based on like the context right there. Like, is this likely a place where there might be civilians? Is this, where am I right now? What time of day? What's the feel of the situation? How many enemy soldiers have I come across already? Like, there's all these subtle cues that you need to use wisdom to be able to recognize. If you're not just going to be a butcher and just throw grenades in every single bunker, right? Which is, again, not the ideal, right? Okay, so we lose these three virtues, according to me, anyway. There's no context to develop them anymore. The military soldier will just be like a Mark Zuckerberg figure, right? But so what, right? One response is, so what? With the development of tech, new technologies, you often lose the necessity of certain virtues. When we shifted from horses to cars, you didn't need the skills of riding horses anymore, caring for horses. And it would be kind of absurd for me to say, like, you know, for Ludwig Hasselberger to come along and say, oh, we should go back to the horses because we lost all the virtues of caring for the horses and riding the horses. Or, you know, when we developed modern anesthetics, you didn't need the same level of courage to go into surgery, right? And oh, we should go back to the good old days, no anesthetics, right? I don't think so, right? So, okay, so maybe, so we lose certain virtues, but maybe, you know, what we gain is compensates for that, right? This happens all the time over the history of the development of technology. So I'll talk about, in addition to the three virtues that we lose, I want to talk about three vices that would arise in this kind of context. So three, not strengths of human beings, but moral weaknesses that would be promoted by this kind of AI-driven military. The first is what Meredith Broussard at New York University calls techno-chauvinism. Techno-chauvinism is the view that for any complex social problem, as she puts it, tech is always the solution. So, has anybody heard of Beth Bezos? Not Jeff Bezos, Beth Bezos. I was just reading about this like a couple of days ago when I'd already arrived here. Beth Bezos is the internet name for a popular blogger and programmer in the Silicon Valley community who defends something called effective accelerationism. So this is the idea that, I mean, it's basically like a meme guy, does a lot of memes. Elon Musk loves the memes, Sam Altman loves the memes. This is the idea that tech companies should innovate ever faster with less resistance from what he calls decels. And decels are people who want deceleration, that is, people who are interested in safety or human rights or the dangers, right? So what we need is effective accelerationism. I mean, you just look up some of the stuff. It's like, definitely, speed it up. Stop listening to these decels. We'll solve problems. Things will get better this way. So I say techno-chauvinism. It's an example of techno-chauvinism. Clearly, if we have the military is a bunch of robots and AI decision-making systems and human beings just fixing the problems on the side, the danger of techno-chauvinism is huge, right? So we have some social problem in some part of the country or whatever, and the AI says we should send in the drones. I mean, the pressure to this sort of psychological force of that would be really strong, right? They know better than us, right? They're more effective and rational, and we're so slow and biased. Okay, the other vice is automation bias, which has already come up, right? Giving undue authority to the machines. And then the third is moral blindness. This is what happens when we distance ourselves from our own actions through the mediation of some technology. So do you guys know the trolley experiment in moral philosophy? Right, so so something fascinating about this experiment is the way that people respond differently to the experiment depending on the place of technology. So the normal way that it's told, right? The train is coming, you have to make a choice between, well, you either do nothing and the train will kill 5 people, or you flip the switch and it'll go off to another track and kill 1 person, and thereby you yourself are involved in the killing of that 1 person. A lot of people will say when it involves flipping a switch, you should do it. I find it surprising, even at Catholic University of Portugal, which is supposed to, a lot of the students are supposed to be Catholic and, not supposed to kill people, right? They will say, yeah, you just flip the switch, kill the guy. Right? But there's a mediating factor, the switch. It's the switch that's killing. In a way, you feel like, okay, I just flipped the switch. I didn't kill a guy. I flipped the switch. That sent the electrical blah, 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 blah down there, and then something changed, and blah, 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 and then the train killed the guy, right? But if you think same situation, but you don't flip a switch, you have to push a person in front of the train to stop it, to not kill the 5. Ooh, a lot of people then say, oh, I'm not gonna push somebody in front of the train, right? That's too much. But from the utilitarian perspective, they're identical. They're identical situations, and you would be irrational not to push a person in front of the train, right? There's no difference from the utilitarian point. I think there is a big difference, but what was important about this is that when tech mediates between decision-making in that way, people can stop recognizing the significance of what they're doing, right? So, okay, we've got some unrest in some part of the country. AI saying that, they can send some drones there to disperse the crowd or whatever. Okay, well, hey, I didn't kill anybody. I didn't hurt anybody. I flipped a switch, right? The sense of responsibility is diminished. There's nobody ultimately responsible. In the human military, there are, of course, war crimes, there are tragedies, but ideally, anyway, you can bring someone in front of a court, and you can say, you can court-martial them, right? It doesn't always happen, but it can happen, and it does sometimes happen, and that's the idea. With the military AI, it doesn't even make sense. What are you going to put the algorithm in front of the court? It's very scared of getting a life sentence in the cloud or whatever, right? What I want to say is only human beings can make a morally lucid decision about life and death. An algorithm doesn't know what it's like on the inside to be a human being, to be alive, to lose something that you care about, to love somebody, to be next to the body of a loved one who's passed away at a funeral. AI doesn't know anything about that stuff and doesn't care. For the AI, it's maximizing for a certain objective. It could be pricing books on Amazon. It could be pricing airfare or deciding to shoot or not on a battlefield. It's the same. There's no intrinsic difference. Okay, so in conclusion, let me just ask, here's this transition that's happened. A lot of people are focused on autonomous weapons, specifically, like just picking out this one thing and saying autonomous weapons, that's this problem, we shouldn't have them. First of all, it's not really making much of a difference. Everybody's developing them at a rapid pace anyway. And secondly, it's missing the wider context in which human beings are being slowly supplanted by AI, not just in the trigger decision, but in all these decisions. And I would say, in future papers, not just in the military, in police and government decisions generally, right? Is this opening up a future in which, AI in effect becomes the soft despot, right? So it's what will this do to us, to human beings, and our moral character? And how will these institutions be perceived? Here's the last question. It's the one that I find the most kind of interesting. How will police or the military be perceived by society when they're just made up of robots and Zuckerbergs? Military has a certain special standing, police, they're supposed to mean something in society, right? But when they're just a bunch of robots and programmers, will they just be felt like a kind of tyrannical technocratic power? I mean, it starts to, if you think about it, I can't help but think as someone who grew up in the 80s, didn't they watch movies? Didn't they watch the sci-fi movies back then? Right? I mean, doesn't this turn society from something like a polity, human community involved in political relationships, into something like a pure technocratic system of social control, including the administration of violence being a form of social control, right? Using machines to administer violence supposedly on people's behalf. That's just a very different kind of institution than what we have. Okay, so I'd like to know what you think.
I have to disagree with you regarding autonomous working systems, because I think that it's beneficial to have these kind of systems because they kind of reduce the possibility of wars. Instead of having full military operations, you'd have like specific targets that you'd like to kill. And I think that would be good to reduce or mitigate the violence in society. And regarding the virtues that you mentioned, I don't think you need courage and like wisdom and loyalty in what, like demonstrating them in wars. You don't need these kind of virtues to demonstrate them in wars. So why not reduce the possibility of violence by developing autonomous systems? You don't need the humane aspect in wars. It's nothing, like, there's nothing humane about it.
Patrick, perhaps like, say who you are and where you're coming from. It might actually also help to contextualize that.
Sorry, I'm too student actually.
And
From Lebanon.
Yeah, good question. So there's 2 points here. One, first about autonomous weapon systems. Yeah, that is one of the defenses, is actually that in a peculiar way, we will humanize war. That is, make war more humane. Let's put it that way. We'll make war more humane by taking humans out of it, right? So that's one of the arguments. You'll have fewer war crimes, because of course human beings commit war crimes out of anger and hatred or fear, right? And if what you've got is machines don't get angry or hateful or fearful, right? They're just, coldly executing their objective. They have no other emotion involved in the fight, so they're not liable to have that kind of response. And maybe you can use fewer machines. You don't have to have human beings, so many human soldiers on the battlefield, less casualties, less PTSD, right? Psychological trauma. Maybe, and there's a guy at Georgia Tech who's named Ron Arkin, who argues that you can actually somehow program the laws of war into the machine. We're not sure how to do it yet, but if we can figure out how to code it, we'll program the laws of war into the machines. And so we'll have like fully moral laws, right? And maybe, yeah, I mean, it could be true. Now would this mean fewer wars? There's another argument that, in fact, if humans are not on the line, if you're a political leader, if you're the prime minister, and you have to make some big decision about whether to commit troops to some fight or not, the fact that your own citizens could be killed and that you would have to answer to the parents of these citizens can often be a check on, it can at least make you think about it carefully, whether you're willing to do that and pay the political costs of doing so. If all you got to do is launch the drones, the cost is very low. And so, as some people put it, this lowers the threshold for conflict, that it will be easier. It will be more like, pest control or something. It's something it doesn't really, you don't pay the same kind of, you don't run the same risk as a politician by doing this, right? It's just, okay, so some drones will get shot down. Who cares? Human beings might be killed. And so there's that. But you said something else that I thought was interesting, which was that maybe you don't need courage and loyalty and wisdom in war. You didn't quite say this, but I felt this.
I mean,
You could have it somewhere else, right?
you can't demonstrate wisdom with in wars. You don't need to. If you have the possibility to remove
The human.
the humane aspect,
Yeah.
why not?
Well, I thought you were going to say we could have them somewhere else. You just don't care if there's no courage and loyalty in society?
No, of course, but what I said is you don't need to demonstrate these kind of traits
In wars, right, okay. So there's this essay that I actually quote in the paper by William James, one of my favorite philosophers, but also a founder of modern psychology. It's called The Moral Equivalent of War. And William James was a pacifist, right? So he wanted to, he was hopeful that one day we would sort of end war in human civilization with progress in the future. However, he's a really brilliant guy and he sort of sees both sides of things. And he says, well, what would, what are the sort of, in a way, the virtues and the amazing qualities that can be displayed by human beings in the military? And he talks about some of these things, about loyalty and courage. And he says, well, would we just end up with a sheep's pleasure paradise? So we get a society where we're basically shoppers. But nobody, there's nothing really heroic anymore about the society. And he sees it as like this, yeah, maybe it's fun and pleasurable and we got nice lattes and whatever, but compare that to, the Homeric epics or something. I mean, it seems like humans are diminished in a way. I mean, okay, we're more comfortable, we're safer, it's healthier, but the extent of our human capacities for excellence is limited. So his line is, because he's a pacifist, he wants to remove it from war, he wants to find it somewhere else. So he thinks like, we have to find other things, whether it's sports or service, national. So he imagines things where people won't be fighting wars, but we'll have like these national service, we'll be building shelters for the poor, or
Boy Scouts.
essentially something like the Boy Scouts, or like, caring for the national parks, or something else where we can exhibit like self-sacrifice. Because if we don't, there's no reason to sacrifice anything of yourself, you're just sort of getting fed by the nice machine in a way. And anyway, it's worth looking at, because he does want to say like, yeah, war has this barbaric side. We need to get rid of that. But in getting rid of that, we lose these, kind of amazing human capacities for heroism. We have to find them somewhere else in society, in some other dimensions of society where they can be achieved. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. I have no personal experience with war. I was just wondering, because when you discuss military in general, you use it as kind of a bubble that kind of exists outside of society, but it has a link to society and decision makers. And you made a step up in your last comment, like those decision makers are held in check somehow, because they're, the citizens are treated as meat sent to die in war, so that should limit them. And I kept wondering throughout your talk, just how much of immorality in wars, and how much of wars themselves happened in human history, because the Jews who made the decision to start the war were not personally liable to any flying bullet.
Right.
So Putin can launch a war and his ugly ass will never be pierced by the bullet. And so just, I know
It's a
that.
scientific term, right?
Yes. And but no, because it is the other end. So you can say that what Patrick is saying, that basically if we just get the, war meat out of the war and we can get the drones fly against each other and maybe just kill a few, collateral damage. And, but I don't think humans would actually accept the results of those wars
Yeah, that's interesting.
fought by drones. And on the other hand, no one is looking at the king who started that war and why the war started and what kind of morality is there. It's very, physical.
Yeah, there's two interesting points. First about, what we Americans would say skin in the game, right? Whether the person is actually personally involved in Kant's famous essay on perpetual peace, he argues that monarchy is, or what he calls, I guess he calls it despotism. A non-Republican political order is more likely to go to war than a republic, because the monarch is insulated from any kind of, doesn't have to fight in the war, doesn't have to pay for the war. The people who fight, the normal citizens are sent to fight the war. They finance the war debt, and they're not even really represented in the political process, in the decision-making process, right? So the decision-making process, as he puts it, could be something like an aristocrat's table game, or I forgot the term he uses, but it's almost like a game that the aristocrats are playing with one another to see who's best. But they don't feel really personally involved in it, so they can. But when it's the people themselves making the decision, they will do so more cautiously, right? Because they are the ones that have to fight, they are the ones that have to bear the burden. Ideally, in a democratic republic, the citizens are represented in the parliament, and so they will be more cautious before they send their own kids to war. Now, I will say one thing that I've been worried about. I end the paper talking about this. In the United States, it used to be the case that the composition of the Senate and the Congress involved a lot of people who either had fought in wars or had family in the military, right? So it was this ideal of like the citizen soldier. The political representatives were themselves, they had experience. So they weren't going to make this decision like in the stupid way where you have no idea what you're doing, right? Oh, just the way, sometimes you hear the way that Trump will talk about, I just bomb the shit out of it. That was one thing, that was literally something he said, right?
So sort of the John McCain's and those.
Yeah, the problem is that's going away.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
the military is becoming a totally separate thing, kind of technocratic, a branch of the kind of administrative state almost. And the politicians have very little experience. So that makes me worried that they'll not make wise decisions, right? Because they don't have any experience. But then you multiply that by 2 if the one that's making the decision isn't even a human being in the first place, right? It would just be, or human beings are just deferring to the AI. The second point was about whether people would accept the results of a war that was just between drones, right? I mean, that's such a funny example. Is that a war? Is it more like a sports game or something? There was this, I'm telling you, these 80s movies, I mean, I gotta think of the 80s and the music too. Nobody's perfect. But so there were these movies about this stuff where like, the robots would go out and fight the war and whatever. But in order to win a war, the population needs to submit or accept the result of the war. But if it's just like, okay, this robot blew up that robot, so what, right? I mean, what does that even do? Right? It's a strange idea. It makes sense. It makes more sense of what we're talking about is drones going to subdue a human population, right? If there's some outbreak of insurgency or something, and drones go to take care of that. Then you could see how But if it's just drones fighting against other drones, I don't, it's this peculiar vision, sci-fi vision of the future. But maybe, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I think it's like super impossible to say like if we can remove the people from the war, we can use just like robot soldiers, because like if we would have that kind of polite society, we will not have a war at that long. So like if we would be like this, yeah, we're super like humanity people, like we're want to save our life, so we'll use just robots. Like I think war it's not only about like some small place, some battlefield where one army of robots will be against other army of robots. It's like some army, it's no matter robots army or humans army, would go to the living quarter of some country and kill the civilians. It's no matter who will come and kill. It means like it's the meat is someone told earlier, you told, will be involved, but it will be just not soldiers' meat, it will be meat of the civilians. And the second part, you told, yeah, we can create the robots which can work under the war law. Yeah, you talked something
Against the, under the,
we can create the robots which will
oh yeah, the
work
laws
only
of war.
under the law of the war. So I would like to see how you will ask the Russia or North Korea create that kind of robots, like which will work under the law. So I think it's fairy tale. It doesn't work. So like all the war, it's only about people dying. No matter robots, drones, or someone will come to count to people and kill them. Even if you have, if one country have army of robots and another country have army of robots, some of them will come to live in quarter and kill the people. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that makes this debate so hard, is that it's not like we're just making this decision for the country that we live in. Like what sort of policy should we have for our country? You know, what's the right ethical policy for the future of our militaries? It's in the context of a global military competition and geopolitical competition about different regimes and there's a lot of, and the concern is, and I understand the concern where people will say, look, if countries, you know, democracies decide that they're gonna limit their own, they're gonna have their drones and stuff all abiding by strictly codified laws of war, and they're gonna not use, or they're not gonna use any lethal autonomous drones, or they're going to limit themselves. There's a real worry that what that is effectively doing is just, yeah, it's weak. It's like saying, okay, we will just unilaterally decide to give up all nuclear weapons. That would be, I mean, it would, in one sense, okay, that's very moral, and it would be, the world would be better without these things, for sure. It would be great if we could just get rid of them. But on another sense, that would be a very reckless decision, because it would suddenly make you much weaker and possibly even, you know, at risk of just being controlled by outside powers, right? So yeah, there isn't an easy solution to it, right?
Yeah, sorry, please bear with me, because this is actually a topic that I wrote about for the final paper with our AI ethics professor last year, Max Pivato, and actually I wrote about it from a soldier's perspective, in terms of the role of national collective identity, political placement, aka patriotism, and national projects, and so it's a very interesting topic to me. Also, I come from a very sort of not long line, but fairly extensive one of actually people who are in the military from my country. So from Tunisia, I have cousins who are serving right now. My dad was a member of the Air Force, and so I'm sort of in it since. And believe me, the debates that happen on this is. But the thing is, I was interested in the fact that, to your point, when you mentioned the fact that the military, for example, is sort of its own world. It doesn't require, actually, it's one of the few domains where it does not require civil society members. I mean, it's usually in the long run where rights of people, but not necessarily, especially if it's an industrialized military, not a primitive one.
Yeah.
What sort of interested me is the fact that, for example, so I'm going to make a bunch of observations very quickly, but end with questions for you if you want. The fact that, for example, sort of what Esther pointed out is the fact that how much of it will be, in terms of liability, how much has historically been, is that that's exactly, I think, to your point, is the fact that historically, the idea of putting your life on the line for your sake, but only the collective sake, has been sort of the grounding stone of political placement, in terms of people essentially decide that I'm sending my daughter or son to defend collectively, to defend me collectively as a nation. So my concern is personally is the fact that will there ever be sort of nations if you have sort of robots fighting for you? Because by definition, people who, you know, we erect statues, write poems, write histories on that ground, is that people have died for us, but that we collectively survive. So for the early nations. And do you really think that, for example, do you think rather?
By the way, the title of the paper is Will Algorithms Win Medals of Honor?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. But anyway, yeah.
Part of it is medals of honor are actually part of it. Is that we recognize that these people have died for us. So. But do you think that, for example, this debate, in terms of we are talking about whether air will replace us in those positions at least, you think it's ironically that it's a privilege in many senses, because maybe in the future, to sort of paraphrase Aaron, for example, in Obama, she talked about how the development of nuclear weapons actually rendered developing in underdeveloped countries safer, and in many ways actually more maybe human, in the sense that they did not reach that level whereby they don't fear, like the politics in many ways in those countries still human, in the fact that, you know, you still have human actors, human soldiers, human tyrants, and human dictators. So in many ways, do you think that it's maybe sort of the privilege that might sort of turn around and hurt to developed countries in that sense politically? Because it might offer them a strategic advantage, but politically it would sort of be a chokehold for them, because they don't court martial generals anymore. They won't have to. The president essentially is like a clerk at this point. If that system is installed, the president or prime minister is essentially like you go to the elevator and you ask the elevator man to just press a button. I think the topic is very interesting, and I talk about in my paper. I talk about the sacrifice, the use of sacrifice in terms of what AI introduction in, for example, these autonomous weapons would have an impact on essentially our way of thinking of patriotism and of sacrifice and national identity.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yes, I've got a question too, but I need you to fast.
Yeah, so I mean, the title of the paper is Will Algorithms Win Medals of Honor? And that, of course, it's facetious, because the answer is no, because they won't deserve. I mean, you can't, to really win, to deserve a Medal of Honor, is you have to know that you're sacrificing something. You have to be, you don't win a Medal of Honor because you save people accidentally without any idea of what you were doing, right? If you just happen to, like, you were driving through the street, you didn't even know what was going on, and you blocked something, and Medal of Honor, right? Now, it has to involve like some understanding of what it is you were doing, an attempt to save your compatriots or help your compatriots, and a willingness to sacrifice, right? But yeah, but then there's the question of whether that is essential to the formation and maintenance of a political order as such, or whether, you know, I mean, it has been historically. But will we transition to a kind of post-political order in a way where those kinds of sacrifices won't be necessary? Maybe people can sacrifice in smaller ways through, in other, through certain kinds of service or other kinds of public engagement, but that sort of ultimate sacrifice will no longer be called for from humans. Maybe that means that the nature of the political order itself changes and the kind of loyalty, maybe people won't feel the same loyalty in a way. And maybe that loyalty won't be necessary if what we have is some other kind of more technocratic mode of managing society. And I get the sense, especially from some of the more utopian or tech utopian thinkers, that the ideal is actually to kind of move us beyond politics in a way. That AI, for instance, we're having such trouble figuring out climate change. Maybe we need a post-political solution to this, right? A kind of AI mandated solution, or CEOs will sometimes talk this way, that AI will solve our problems in a way for us because our standard political means have become exhausted. We can't agree. We can't work these things out ourselves. The traditional nature of a political community is now, it's not up to the task of the kinds of things that we need to solve going forward in the future. And so we may need to give up that kind of nostalgic, closely bonded, heroic kind of traditional political order and shift into something else, something else. Whether that's a benefit or not, I don't know. I mean, I gave some reasons for skepticism.
In fact, that I want to carry on with this idea is that what we've been discussing with the students over the first and second year is the fact that with modernity, what has happened is a lowering of expectations and a lowering especially of what is essentially virtue. Because commerce has replaced war, and it's supposed to have replaced war. You trade instead of actually saying, I'm taking and killing.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, what you're describing very much is in fact a sort of what you just described here, a sort of postmodern age in which your disconnection is even further in terms of a lowering of not the virtues, but of virtue in itself. Because the disconnection here is related to the fact that you don't even want to face any of your fears anymore. That you could actually have faced in the form of another, in a local war, even in the modern age. So that's my feeling. And in this new world, or in this postmodern age, what you've got is really, well, he says a lot, as you rightly said on Tuesday, about what does it mean about us as human beings if we would prefer to live in a virtual game than actually face up to our lives. That's the first question. And my second question is related to the fact that Patrick and Esther and Artem, I think, mentioned, I mean, what they were talking about is the fact that you're a philosopher and I work in the history of ideas. And so my methodology is different to yours in the sense that with Patrick, Artem, and Esther, what we had was a contextualization of the use of drones, for example. And obviously enough, it's interesting when Patrick is coming from Lebanon and Artem is coming from Ukraine.
Right.
And again, Esther from Hungary, but they are not, I mean, yes, they're at war in different ways. And so it's interesting for me because I look at it in a different light and thinking, perhaps, if I completely understand the way in which you're thinking about it as a philosopher, I look at, for example, the trolley experience differently. That's again something we mentioned all together, is that if you're thinking about it in the absolute, you could actually have the 5 people and you could have 1 person. But you could actually put yourself in the context in which you are five of your students and your mother.
Right.
And so in fact, you're not going to look at the trolley experience in the same way, because in fact you are going to contextualize and put your values in.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if in fact a part of the article can also be put in this sort of light of a sort of postmodern world, and also a world in which perhaps the use of drones might be useful to target certain key, you know, if you're going to target with a drone, I don't know, for example, the place in which, for example, an army is hiding a number of weapons which are going to kill civilians. Yeah, you know, then we can play those philosophical games. And so I think that I get what you're saying about the loss of virtues completely. But what does it say? What does it say about us as human beings? Where are we going?
Yeah, both good questions. And I don't want to say, I don't want it to make it seem like I'm saying, okay, we should give up drones or something, or that this is, in a way, I'm not so much talking about that as the kind of where we're headed with this and what the implications could be. And what people have tended to focus on are things like, you know, oh, well, what if all the lethal autonomous weapons, what if they get out on the black market?
Yeah.
What if they malfunction? What if, I mean, the sort of Terminator scenarios, what if they start functioning in a way that we don't want them to? Which, I mean, that's all super important to think about too, because, you know, if we're not, I mean, it's not the case that, or what if they're hacked, right? I mean, you can imagine, it's not the case that you, and a foreign power can just like hack into the brains of all your soldiers and then turn them all against you, right? Whereas in this case, it could be, so, but those are more technical issues, right? They're serious, we should think about them, but where, in a way, I'm thinking like, how does this change society itself, the way that police or the military are perceived by society, the way that people come to see them, right? Because I do think it's very different looking at, I mean, look how fraught police and the military already are in society right now, right? So controversial, so much tension, you know, some atrocities, some, you know, there's real problems there. But they're still supposed to be our fellow citizens. They're supposed to be accountable. They're supposed to be, we can, you know, protest against it. And, you know, they're supposed to be protecting us. You know, that's the function anyway, and within the political order. But when it's robots and Zuckerbergs, it's just very different, right? It becomes like they're not, you don't see yourself in the soldier anymore. It's a machine, right? It's something post-human. They're acting on your behalf, right? It becomes this kind of alien, benevolent despot or something, right? Which might have a lot of advantages. I mean, I don't deny that, you know, maybe this ends up being good for us in a lot of ways, and maybe fewer civilian casualties. I mean, that is an argument that we should take seriously. Like, it'll be more accurate, it'll be more precise, it won't shoot out of anger, right? It won't go on a shooting spree because it just lost its buddy next to him, right? The way that a human can do, right? So that's serious. You know, we should seriously think about it. But it's this big change that, you know, do we want the life and death decisions, whether of police or of the military, in the hands no longer of people? One last question.
One last question, yeah.
I would just like to ask, like, outside the experiences with police and military, do you think that military experiences can affect some of our life decisions, like individually, when it talks about college, when it talks about wisdom, just like you talked about the Socratic and the virtues being a skill, like being built up. Do you think that like affects the way we?
Well, I'm not the best person to ask about this because I don't have military experience myself. I will say though I've had I would say, I mean, I've been an honor to teach in the United States when I'm teaching university there. We have this system there where after a certain number of years of military service, your college is completely paid for. Even, private college, you go to an expensive school, it's totally paid for by the state. And so I've had these, I've been like teaching classes like this, and a guy will raise his hand and say, yeah, well, I was a helicopter gunner in Afghanistan, blah, blah, blah. And I'm suddenly like, ooh, I feel like much less of I actually don't know what I'm talking about here, But I think the answer, if the classical perspective on virtue is correct, then the answer must be yes, that it can inform decision making. You look at these great, these sort of presidents or prime ministers or whatever that have had that sort of experience, and that it feeds into their thinking, whether